To get started?
I'm ready.
All right, we're in 2 Corinthians chapter 8 tonight, and really happy to have you here.
Alrighty, well, I will start in verse 1. Now I want to tell you, dear brothers and sisters, what God in his kindness has done for the churches in Macedonia. Though they have been going through much trouble and hard times, their wonderful joy and deep poverty have overflowed in rich generosity. For I can testify that they gave not only what they could afford, but far more. And they did it of their own free will. They begged us again and again for the gracious privilege of sharing in the gift for the Christians in Jerusalem. Best of all, they went beyond our highest hopes, for their first action was to dedicate themselves to the Lord and to us for whatever direction God might give them.
All right, so there's Paul's on his third missionary journey, and so it's a different thing that he's doing this missionary journey because Jerusalem, which is the mothership, it's the mother church. It sent out all of this help and got other churches started, and then they themselves came under severe persecution. And really, at this time, historically, they say that there's a famine happening in Jerusalem. So here's this big glorious church that's been picked apart by persecution. A lot of people fled. Now they're going through a famine, and so that once strong and mighty church is now shrunk way down, and so it's shrunk way down. And what is happening is that other churches are wanting to help Jerusalem, the church in Jerusalem,
Right.
And so the Apostle Paul is literally collecting an offering for this church. And how great is it, that, and it talks about the churches in Macedonia. So those are the churches in Philippi, Thessalonica, and Berea. And so these are the churches that we're going to talk a little bit about right from the beginning.
Alrighty, well, I will go ahead and pick back up in verse 6 of 2 Corinthians 8.
Wait, hold on one second. Hold on, I had another
Stop,
thought.
break.
I love the fact that it says that in verse 2, it says their abundance of joy and their deep poverty overflowed in the wealth of their liberality. That's what my verse 2 says. I don't know what your verse 2 says. But literally, they gave from their poverty. They gave from their poverty. And so, we talk about, do you guys know the story about the widow's mite? And there were, the wealthier people, and Jesus talked about how they gave from their excess, right? They're like, okay, I have this extra $100. I'm not going to use it, so I'll tithe it. and rather than the widow's mite, where she gave all that she had. She gave all that she had, so that she didn't give out of her excess. She gave out of she gave everything she had. And so this is that same, not exactly it, but these are poverty. These are people in poverty, and yet they were producing these huge donations, and that's what he's saying. He's saying, so it's he says, according to their ability and beyond their ability, and they gave of their own accord. And it says that they begged to support the saints there. And it says, not as we had expected, but they gave so much more. And so this is so amazing, because obviously we have a lot of abundance in our country, and we don't always do great at paring back our spending. But if we give to God first, of our first fruits, you can give even from your poverty. I'm not going to say that any of us are rich here, but even if you are in poverty, if you give to God first, you can still give from your poverty. And he's talking about, he's bragging on them saying how amazing they are. So that's a pretty great thing for the Apostle Paul to say about any church or any group of people. I'd be honored, right? I'd be honored. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and pick back up in verse 6 of 2 Corinthians 8. So we have urged Titus, who encouraged your giving in the first place, to return to you and encourage you to complete your share in this ministry of giving. Since you excel in so many ways, you have so much faith, such gifted speakers, such knowledge, such enthusiasm, and such love for us. Now I want you to excel also in this gracious ministry of giving. I am not saying you must do it, even though the other churches are eager to do it. This is one way to prove your love is real.
To prove your love is real. And it says, and again, he's bragging on these Corinthian believers, and he's saying they're excelling in so much. In our commentary, it says they're excelling in faith, in good preaching or utterance, in much knowledge, much earnestness, and much love. But he wanted them to also be leaders in giving as a natural response to the love that they've received from Jesus Christ. In our commentary, it says, when you love someone, you want to give him or her your time and attention, and you want to provide for their needs. If you refuse to help, your love is not as genuine as you say it is. And that's kind of like putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, and it's honestly a good lens to have when you are dating.
It is.
Right? If the person you're with isn't a provider, isn't somebody that would take care of you when you're sick, when you're sad, when things like that, not necessarily financially, that's also part of it, but not all of it.
Yeah, I think not in the beginning,
right?
But
and I think this is kind of a good reminder of those things as well, not just as a church, but even in other relationships that you may have.
Absolutely. And so this, so as the Apostle Paul's talking to the Corinthians, he's talking about the other churches, but I like how he says you don't have to. I don't know what verse that is, but let's see. Was that in 7?
Yeah.
We're inspired in you.
8.
8.
I am not saying you must do it.
There you go.
Even though the other churches are eager to do it.
Yeah. So it's great because he's automatically saying, like, I'm not, he's not sending them a bill. We know there are some religious cults that you have to tell them how much you make per year. You have to basically give them your tax return, and then they send you a bill for 10%. And then if you don't pay your bill, then you're not in good graces in that cult. And so that's a cult that many people are in. So it's great that he's not forcing it, because I don't know if you've ever been like forced to give.
Well, and it says, in the Bible too, right, that you should give from a gracious heart. You should be
with
giving
joy.
Yeah, you should be giving because you want to, because you love what you're giving it to. Does that make sense? And obviously we're talking about the church, not giving money to the restaurant or
yeah.
We're talking about giving it to the church or and other
God's work,
other various organizations that will do God's work.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's I think that there are expectations, and he's talking about these expectations, right? And he's pointing to the fact that these churches in Macedonia are doing very well, and he's very proud of them, and he's very, he's blown away by how much they can give. So he's not saying like, so you need to, $99.95, like, here's your bill, cut a check, sort of thing. I don't know how you feel. I just was today, where did we go? We went somewhere and they're like, oh, do you want to round up for AIDS research? Or do you want to round up to the nearest dollar for this and that? And I'm thinking, I don't really know where that's going. You know, if you look on like Charity Star, you can look and see, you know, like there are some organizations where like a third of what you give goes to administration of that charity. So charities are not always transparent. They should be, but you know, there's somebody at the top who's making some money. Churches, I would hope, are transparent. I know that our churches, you know, anytime anybody wants to know anything about our finances, they can ask, because we need to be transparent. We need to be trustworthy. We don't have a lot of bills right now as for our church, but there, I'm sure there are those big churches. I'm sure their balance statements are probably, you know, 10 pages long,
Right.
and you know, and they've got 25 pastors and you know, all that stuff. That's a lot.
Well, and some of them have schools
Yeah,
that are attached, you know, on the church campus.
Yeah, sometimes those are money making.
Correct.
Sometimes those are not. They're, you know, they're actually supporting that school. It just depends. So these are good things to know. However, you know, giving to the Lord's work should be a joy. It should be a joy. And even though we're not providing you with a bill, because he's not saying 10% anywhere in here, I think it's something that we utilize because it's easy, because it is referenced in the Old Testament, because a tithe means tenth. But, you know, you are welcome to give more than a tenth. You are welcome to give 50%. You're welcome to give whatever God is telling you to give. You know, sometimes he tells you to give a lot more than you actually want to give. And those are the times, you know, we've seen that happen many times in our ministry. You need to be obedient because you're going to be blessed. You're going to be blessed in a big way. So,
all right, well, I will go ahead and pick back up in verse 9 of 2 Corinthians 8. You know how full of love and kindness our Lord Jesus Christ was. Though he was very rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that by his poverty he could make you rich. I suggest that you finish what you started a year ago, for you were the first to propose this idea, and you were the first to begin doing something about it. Now you should carry this project through to completion, just as enthusiastically as you began it. Give whatever you can according to what you have. If you are really eager to give, it isn't important how much you are able to give. God wants you to give what you have, not what you don't have. Of course, I don't mean you should give so much that you suffer from having too little. I only mean that there should be some equality. Right now, you have plenty and can help them. Then at some other time, they can share with you when you need it. In this way, everyone's needs will be met. Do you remember what the scriptures say about this? Those who gathered a lot had nothing left over, and those who gathered only a little had enough.
Sounds like the manna, the story of manna, how they couldn't hold on to too much. They couldn't like stockpile it.
Right.
They just needed to trust God every single day. So it says that Christ became poor. I don't know that that's necessarily financial. I think it's because he set aside so very much. He set aside, you know, his place in heaven, and he came down and he became human, and then he made us rich by giving us salvation, the opportunity for salvation, the opportunity for eternal life. So you can see how we're not necessarily talking about money here. We're talking about, you know, the intrinsic value that Jesus became poor, although we do know he was homeless.
Yes.
The Bible says he's like I can't remember what he was like.
Nomad?
The foxes?
Oh, I don't know.
But yeah, like
Yeah, nomadic life.
Yeah, he had nowhere to lay his head,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's, that's a great thing for all of us who crave such stability. And I need my house, and I need my car, and I need, and Jesus is like, I don't need any of it. So he didn't have a boat. He didn't have a horse. He had to borrow some donkeys sometimes, but basically, he wasn't a man of any means, so that people couldn't point and say, oh, but you bought yourself into this situation, or or you paid off these people so that you would have this luxury. Nope, nope. I don't think he had any of that. But but it in kind of in this area here, it just says that it says give to your ability. And I don't know what that means to you. I think it definitely means that you need to plan. It'll talk about that. Well, actually it talks about that a little bit in verse 12, right? And how do you plan how much to give? How do you make that plan? How do you put that in your head? And it says there's a couple principles that Paul gave the Corinthian church, and he said, follow through on your previous promises, right? Because he said, hey, you started this last year, you need to finish strong. So if you promise to give, then you need to follow through. Each person should give as much as he or she is able, as much as you are able. Number 3, each person must make up his or her own mind how much to give. And then number 4, each person should give in proportion to what God has given him or her, because God gives it to us so that we can give it to others, so that we can give it to the ministry. So I think here it's just talking about, just be purposeful. Is that the word?
Yeah, I think that when you have the mindset that it's not your money, it's God's money, and you are just you're just the manager.
Yeah.
You're managing the money. So almost like, financial advisors, right? You give them a lump sum of money, or, monthly, or however you do it, but you give them money that you're entrusting to them to manage and to help it grow, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're expecting that, it's going to grow. They're going to manage it well.
Yeah.
They're going to manage it well. And so I think that's what God does for us. Is I think he also gives us gifts and talents, as well as finances, that all should be given.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
he doesn't want us to give so much that it's a detriment to our family's basic needs.
And he definitely says that.
Right.
And then he says, but make sure that there's like some equality. So if you have some extra this time, maybe you can put some more in, because there might be a season where you don't have the extra. Jen and I are not old, but like we talk about retirement.
Right.
We talk about like
fixed income,
what that would be like in years from now. And it's like, well, hey, we might be making more now, but in those years when we're retired, maybe we wouldn't have as much to give. So, it's like, all right, well, so now if you can give more at this point in your career, and then, you would give less when you're on maybe more of a fixed income. But you can see, like, maybe, I was just thinking about like Hurricane Katrina, right? A lot of us sent funds down to help those people. And then once their lives kind of got, then they can get back on track, they can rebuild, and then, then they can give to their church on their own. But we have to take care of each other. And there are seasons of plenty, and there are seasons of need. And so he's like, don't pass by those seasons of plenty and not give a little extra, because you are going to be in a season of need, and you're going to need somebody to give who's in a season of plenty to give a little bit more that time. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Right. Let's see. John said, Luke 38, give and it will be given to you in good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you.
Absolutely. There's a great blessing in giving. And so the only other thing that I would talk about for giving is, and maybe this is just so very, maybe you can already figure out what I'm going to say before I say it, but when he talks about like fulfilling your promise, I know that I've done this before many times and trying to teach my kids how to do it too. And they say, oh, I'm going to, because you get excited. I'm going to tithe whatever, $500 a month. I'm so excited, and then bills come up and all this, and then all of a sudden you don't have any money left, and you slip $200 in, and you know that you've missed the mark. He's talking about like make up your mind what you're going to give, and give it. Mm-hmm. Now $500 is too much, and scale it back. Make it 300, make it 250, whatever. But then stick with that. Pay him first when you get paid. Give him the first fruits. And that way if you run tight at the end of the month, then you're running out of money like for McDonald's rather than running out of money for tithing. Does that make sense? So I think there's probably a little bit of Dave Ramsey in there, but it does say that he's saying like each person they should make up their mind. It's in verse 7. Make up your mind to give what you're going to give, and stick to it. Stick to that promise, just like he told them. This is what you started. You got to finish strong. So I know that I'm a pastor. I know that I'm saying this, but I will tell you that I have so many stories about people who got really serious about their tithing, and their lives changed. Their lives turned around.
For the better.
For the better, thank you.
Yes.
For the better. And they're like, and then the poorhouse. No, they're, it's, God's not a genie. That's not how it works. But I truly believe that when we really get, when we're really committed, right? I mean, maybe you've seen this in your prayer life, or in your worship life, or in reading scripture. Like I get blessed. I get charged up. It's the same with giving. When you really give, I believe God really blesses. That's all.
All right. I will go ahead and pick back up in verse 16 of 2 Corinthians 8. I am thankful to God that he has given Titus the same enthusiasm for you that I have. He welcomed our request that he visit you again. In fact, he himself was eager to go and see you. We are also sending another brother with Titus. He is highly praised in all the churches as a preacher of the good news. He was appointed by the church to accompany us as we take the offering to Jerusalem, a service that glorifies the Lord and shows our eagerness to help. By traveling together, we will guard against any suspicion, for we are anxious that no one should find fault with the way we are handling this generous gift. We are careful to be honorable before the Lord, but we also want everyone else to know we are honorable.
There we go. So I love that he talks about Titus. It was Titus, right?
Yep.
And he says, Titus is excited. And it says he's gone to you of his own accord. So he's excited to go and visit them. And it says that, and then there's this other brother. Poor guy didn't get a name in the Bible here. Other brother is his name, but that's okay. But he was gonna travel with Paul and Titus, and it says he was elected by the churches, so he had some kind of trust. They were trusting him, and he was going to travel with the Apostle Paul and Titus to make sure that he calls it a generous gift. So who knows what it was, but I'm sure it was big. So generous gift to make sure that it got to Jerusalem safe and sound. Also that it says that no one would discredit us in our administration. Like that way, where'd you get those new pair of shoes, Paul? And where'd you get that new coat, Titus? Are you skimming off the top of this generous gift that's supposed to go to the Church of Jerusalem? So it's just another watchful eye, and you can't have too much accountability when it comes to money. I'm just saying, there needs to be. There are many churches that have faced embezzlement. There's many churches that have faced theft or mismanagement, and usually that's because there wasn't enough checks and balances. There weren't enough people watching the store. And so it's really important that your leadership, your church leadership, or whoever, that they're above reproach, and that you have a good understanding of where things are going, and what the church supports. And so I think it's a good. We talk about spec. We talk about sins and promises and examples and commands.
Right.
And sometimes when Jen and I are studying the Bible, we look for those four things. And so this is a great example.
Yes.
I'd say that's a great example to follow, is to have extra accountability whenever you're handling money, but especially God's money, because there are people there. I myself cleaned up a major embezzlement in a church, not our church, but in another organization that was God's money, and it is crazy. It's crazy how people can justify stealing from God. It's sad. It's really sad.
It is, and it's that whole love of money. It's not the money itself; it's the love of money that is the root of evil. So, just to clarify,
yeah, it sucks you in.
It does.
It sucks you in, and and that's why I was saying about when to pick an amount to tithe and to stick to it, because you will very easily erode that money and that amount.
Yeah,
and
within your means, right?
Yeah,
Like I mean, if you're gonna start this tithing journey, start within your means, and then as your income increases or as your budgeting gets better, then you can increase it. But to start off gung ho, of I'm going to do $1,000, it's
you might have to pull back a little,
right?
But don't then pull back because there's a sale on shoes. I'm talking to myself, and don't pull further back, because then the kids need something, and we said we'd go out to dinner with these people, and all of a sudden that amount that you had set forth to give to God has been whittled down to literally what's left. But if you give God first, if you give him from your first fruits, you never have to handle that. You never have to deal with that.
Treat it like a bill. Honestly, I mean, that's what I do. I'm old school, and I still have a check register that I write everything down in.
That's cute.
And I do it as a bill, like it's part of the bills that come out, and so that's how I do it. That makes it easier for me to
budget. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's funny. My daughter is just learning how to budget, and she's like, I don't know where the money goes. It's just, and I'm like, welcome to adulting. She's 18, but I'm like, it happens quickly. The money just goes, and there's Starbucks, and there's gas, and there's gasoline, and there's an acai bowl over here, and all of a sudden you're broke again. And she's like, I've got to figure out how to budget better. Like, yes you do, and it is a skill that has to be learned. I don't know if that's just, I don't know. Jen's daughter is really great at it. So maybe it is something that you could be born with, but I think the rest of us need to hone that skill.
Yeah, she's pretty good. She's pretty good. She, when
Yeah.
we're shopping, she's like, "Do you need it?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do." Just kidding.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Like, what is this? Where am I with my mother? I guess. God bless him. It's not easy, but giving to God reaps great rewards. Great rewards.
It does. All right, well, I'll pick back up in verse 22 of 2 Corinthians 8. And we are also sending with them another brother who has been thoroughly tested and has shown how earnest he is on many occasions. He is now even more enthusiastic because of his increased confidence in you. If anyone asks about Titus, say that he is my partner who works with me to help you. And these brothers are representatives of the churches. They are splendid examples of those who bring glory to Christ. So show them your love and prove to all the churches that our boasting about you is justified.
I love it. I love it. So here's, yes, the other brother again. But it's just more accountability. It's more of them being so very careful with God's money, which is what we should all be. We should all be very, very careful with God's money. So so I don't know how this chapter kind of sits with you. I don't know if it has challenged you about your giving. I don't know if you feel like really great about your giving. But I know that anytime we talk about money, anytime we talk about giving, it feels very personal, and people kind of get, I say, even in my own heart, I'm a little defensive. I'm like, I'm giving, I'm doing okay, I'm doing okay. And so I think it's just a great time to kind of just be self-aware of, not like in a new age way, but just like, how is your giving? How does it make you feel, right? Do you, are you feeling like you're obedient to God? And then do you feel the blessings of God? Do you need to check in with him and just ask for, the abundance? He doesn't need your money. He has all the resources in the whole universe. He doesn't need your money. This is to build our own faith muscle so that we can understand. We do not. We're not the source of everything. He's the source of everything, and so even the good gifts we're given, we need to give him a portion back.
And I think it's a good lesson on obedience too, right? On obedience.
Yeah, giving is obedience, and like I said, there's nothing laid out here about how much you have to give. We read in the book of Acts, when we studied the book of Acts, they gave everything. We read about Barnabas, who sold his land and laid everything at the feet of the apostles. So be careful when you're like, it doesn't say about giving in the Bible. Yes, it does. In the New Testament, there are many people that gave it all. And so, but the Apostle Paul's not saying that here. He's saying, don't give to your detriment, but give what you're able to and follow through on that giving. So,
and also too is I think it is maybe something to consider too is not to compare yourself to others. Right? Some people may be able to give generously, give an abundant amount. That doesn't mean your $10 isn't enough or isn't as much. It's about giving out of what you have. And just like Tina was talking about the widow, she didn't give much, but she gave everything that she had. So I think that's a lesson too, is to not compare yourself and be like, oh my, I'm not as good of a Christian because I'm not giving as much as so and so.
Yeah, no, that's
it's not about that. It's about you and God. It's not about what they're doing. It's about what you're doing in your relationship.
Yeah, I love that.
Let's see, John said, a lot of them sold their homes and gave it all to the needy.
Yeah, they made sure that nobody in their areas,
community,
in their communities, were in need, and so they made sure to. It's not communism. That's not what it is. It was just, he said that by way of equality in 2 Corinthians 8:13, by way of equality, again, like, because some have abundance and some, and we would like to say, oh, I'm responsible for all the money I have. It was all me and great investing and all my hard work, but you've seen people who, we have a neighbor up the street whose son was killed by a driver, and the driver, I guess the son was making a wrong turn or something. Anyway, so the driver who killed him got injured, and he sued the family, and they had to sell their house. Here they are with they've lost their son, and now they've lost their family home. So you see these sort of situations where it's like, well, that wasn't fair. But then you see people who have a whole bunch of money, and because they just did something right at the right time, and so so things are always unequal in our universe. And so so he's saying, like, hey, if you've got more, give to those who are needy, just kind of like what John was saying, so that we make sure that, especially the people in our church and our fellowship, is everybody have food at home? Like, make sure that the kids in your church are eating. Make sure that everybody has a roof over their head. Like, let's all come together and help those folks.
And not just at Thanksgiving. There's always these there's always these food drives at Thanksgiving, and it's like, well, what about all the other weeks of the year?
Yeah, summer is a hard time for children,
right?
Because they don't go to school, because they get free meals at school, but not during the summer. And so all of a sudden kids can be very hungry during the summer. So there's lots of places that we need to, help, and there's lots of people that we need to help, and
there's lots of ways to help. Obviously, tithing and giving to your home church is I think top priority, but there's other ways to give. I see GoFundMe's, and so there are times where I will donate to various things that it's a friend that's in need, or somebody passed away and they're trying to raise money to be able to have a funeral, those types of things where where giving, if
you can give,
where giving is great as well.
Yes, there's always great needs, and we have to stay sensitive to it, and we have to make sure that we're doing this giving. Obviously, the Apostle Paul said a lot about it in this chapter and gave us a lot of directives, but I know that it comes with great favor and great blessings as well.
And sometimes it's not just all monetary. If you really just cannot give monetarily, give of your time.
Give of your time. You want to read?
Sorry, John. We need to give more than money. Thank you. See, John, we think same wavelength.
Say, that's right.
We need to give more than money, our time, or any other thing that we may have that others may need, one like love and kindness as well as others.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So give of time, give of your talents, give of your, sometimes it's your passions. If your passions are baking or cooking, or, maybe you make a meal for somebody. So there's lots of ways.
Make a meal for me. I know.
There's lots of ways of giving to show love towards somebody else and to show, God's love.
Absolutely. So these are all just great reminders. If you haven't thought about giving a lot lately, maybe this is for you. I think it was for me tonight. Just isn't it a great idea to even just stop and reassess,
right,
what it is that I'm giving? Because we go on autopilot, literally. Now we just transfer it in, or we just, the check goes out like a bill. And maybe you need to reconsider what you're doing or what you're giving, or the promises that you've made, that the Apostle Paul says, can, follow through with those promises. and make sure that we're just walking in the will of God. And so it's just a great reminder. Thank you, Lord, for giving us this chapter so we can think about this a little bit today. So in our land of plenty, America, the land of plenty. So
Yep.
all right, well,
That's it.
2 Corinthians chapter 8 in the books. And we're super excited to